Hey, this is Henry Sanders with another episode of Real Talk, and I am so excited about this conversation. I want to introduce you to family members of the community.
M. Adams with Freedom Inc.
Yeah, you hesitate like, you know who you are, right?
Yeah, I do.
And Kaleem, Caire.
And so I know both these people well. Actually, Kaleem and I go way back, Southside guy, but he's brilliant. He knows education, like nationally knows education, but he really understands mass education. I mean, there's probably a handful of people who actually know the school system, the history of it, as well as Kaleem. And M. Adams, who I've become a bigger fan of, the consistency and the thought process of our last interview we had. You were just so consistent. It was just beautiful to me how you actually understood everything you're trying to do. Even if people disagree, it was so well thought out. So it was brilliant. So I'm excited to have these people who are more talented, more smarter than I am here at this table. So, but I want to talk about what happened in the past couple of weeks around education, because this is, to me, is the number one issue for our city right now is education. I think we need more of a real conversation. We really need to have a black conversation about what's going on with our kids in our schools. And Brother Kaleem was at a school board meeting, and there were some kids cursing, and Brother Kaleem got up and addressed the issue. And he then wrote a post, right? He wrote a post later. That was like 300 shares on our site. I know it was a lot of shares. And he confronted the issue. Out of that, there's people in the community who really felt like he was not understanding the grasp of the issue with kids, I think. And so I want to talk about this conversation because I think M had a different perspective. Mm-hmm. And there's people who agree with you, and there's people who agree with you. But I think it's important for us to have this conversation because I think if we don't talk about it and we don't have real conversations, it's not going to get solved, right? Because we've been dealing with this for how long? Since I've been growing up. I've been my whole life, forever. And so first, I think I want to talk about this in two different tactics. Like, I want to talk about black culture and tactics, right? Because I think, to me, in my simple way of thinking, you're talking about more of a black culture. This is what I'm hearing. Just tell me if I'm wrong. And you're talking more about tactics, right? And so when y'all hear black people come to Madison, what do they say about black folks here?
They talk about how weird we are, man.
How weird we are. Mm-hmm. And so, do you hear that from black folks?
That we're weird?
That black folks, I'm always, people come from other places, they always talk how black folks here, we're weird, we're different, like, we're not the rest of black folks. Progress says this all the time.
Oh, okay, now I understand what you mean. I hear that sometimes.
Right?
My whole family says it.
Right, so you have people coming from the South or North Carolina or whatever, they talk about how just we're different, we're black folks, even people from Milwaukee say how we're different.
Yeah, that's where I'm from.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right, so you would say that, right? Black folks in Madison, we'll feel different
at first, yeah.
Right, you adapt, right? And so, but you hear this all the time, right? And I think this comes down to a cultural identity, right? So, I want to talk about this part first. I kind of sense that in Madison, that our black youth have a lack of identity, what it means to be black, of the black culture of who we are. And what I heard you saying was, kids cursing and swearing and all that stuff goes against the black culture of who we are as our black community, right? This is what I'm hearing. Mm-hmm. And what you also were saying was what was going on there is also playing out in the schools. Mm-hmm. I think that's what I heard. And then I hear what you were saying was, look, we're trying to, you said this in our last interview, the tactics, these teachers have not heard our kids, still don't listen to our students. These kids have to disrupt in a way that gets their attention. Right?
Yeah, I did say that.
Okay. So, start there, Kaleem. Let's talk about this black culture thing because I do think, my mom's from down south, my daddy's from down south, they say yes ma'am, no ma'am, all that stuff still down south. Like, I go down south, my cousins, they still call my mama who's older than me yes ma'am and no ma'am. So that's part of the culture down south. Explain to me, to people who were trying to understand what you said when you were at the school board.
So I've been an organizer for 30 years, man. And, even the jobs that I've had, it's been a high-level organizing, locally, nationally, internationally. When I listened to our young people initially, and I started seeing them at board meetings more frequently over a year ago. And then And then I started to watch more closely this fall as I was weighing whether or not I was going to run for mayor or I was going to run for school board, right? You know that. And I found I found their comments fascinating, that these young people are organized and presenting their opinions and their points very clearly, and one after the other, and just the organization of what they, the shirts they're wearing. And I was like, okay, these kids are getting ready, getting ready for a revolution. And initially, I didn't take the words to be, they were derogatory, but I wasn't that fixated on it yet. It was when I kept hearing it over and over again where I started to be like, you guys, I'm watching the people. If you're trying to organize people, you always got to be attuned to what are people doing, what are they thinking, because I was assuming the goal was to get some policy passed, to get something done. And it started to feel like it's more about what I'm saying than what I'm producing. And so when I heard the language kept going on and on and on, and I'm in the schools all the time. That's what I don't think people understand. I'm in the schools all the time. My own children go there. I spend a lot of time at their schools, at other schools. I've had kids cuss me out a couple times. Usually I can get them to calm down. But there's a whole lot going on in our schools right now that is just, it blows my mind. Things that we just didn't say or do when we were kids. Our kids are losing it. Part of it is, I feel that our adults haven't been paying attention to these children. We are living in an adult-driven society where kids don't get a lot of airtime in their own homes a lot of times, right? So there is a desire for them to scream out and listen to us. But at the same time, what you say can be empowering to your message or disempowering to your message. And when you start cursing and you start using those language and you direct them at people too, all of a sudden now people stop listening. And that is exactly what's been happening. Now, I personally feel that young people have the greatest and strongest voice in education right now. Seriously, because adults, unless you work in schools, adults generally aren't paying that much attention in communities to these young people. So you can say what you need to say. You can say it loudly. You can organize. You can shut down a meeting. But when you start going there and you start getting up in people and you start using those words, it's a reason for them to cancel you out. So I said that. Second, though, was just the general disrespect I see towards adults in schools. So culturally, yeah, that's a big part of me. You don't disrespect your elders like that. And when I walked out of that meeting at East High School, I wasn't thinking of posting anything, although I did suggest to MMSD beforehand that I might do that because they knew when I came in that I came in to say something. When I walked out and there were 3 black staff, Chauncey, some others, there were 2 Latina staff, they usually reached out to me, grabbed my hand and said, thank you for saying that. We go through this every day in this school. This community has no idea what's going on in these schools. People need to get in here. Young people can go talk to these people. I encourage people to go talk to the folks in the schools. If you don't trust white folks, talk to the black Latino staff in the schools. They are saying the same thing. And so I'm like, there's a disconnect here. And so if we're reinforcing this language and approving it in one standpoint, when I saw these adults clapping for that, I was like, Lord have mercy, what are we doing? And then we got the kids in the schools doing it infinitum. I just heard more about it this morning. My daughter, I talked to a group of kids at West High School, 50 of them, 2 days ago, 2 classrooms of kids. One brother using it coming in the classroom. I said, yo, I stopped him. And he apologized and he recognized it's a habit. That's how I talk. I said, well, you know what? There's a language that I use that's on the street. There's a language that I use in the classroom. I said, you got to know where you are. And he understood. But I'm like, we're not having those conversations, young people. So what we have now in our schools is we do have a lot of young people showing disrespect to adults. And I don't think it's just because they're traumatized. I think it's because they know they can get away with it. So that set aside, we do have racism. We have racist teachers. We have people who shouldn't be in schools. We have people that are burned out. They should have been gone a long time ago. But that's not what I was talking about that moment. I was talking about how do we empower our children to have an empowered voice, an empowered dialogue where they can actually get results and not get shut down because of the words that they say. And second, how can we also, not as adults, reinforce what we see playing out in our schools every day, which is bad language, bad behavior towards each other, but also towards adults. That if we tolerate that and we say that that's acceptable, where do we go from there? So I'm concerned about all of those things, and that's why I spoke up. I was very careful, though, not to mention any organization. I didn't even know Freedom Inc. was there until you walked out. And I wasn't surprised to see you when you walked out because you do come to a lot of board meetings. But normally you guys have shirts and all that stuff on. But I know Frank Skiro, his son, was involved with a group there. And he said he was coming from a school. The last time I was at a school board meeting and I saw him, I said, I wonder if who are all these different groups with these kids? So I wasn't pinning it on any particular group. I've always wanted to be public. I've always been supportive of Freedom Inc. Because outside of you, Simpson Street Free Press, Operation Fresh Start, there are a handful of organizations in Madison that give young people a real voice. And I feel we should hear from them. My issue was the language. And so then when people started writing about respectability politics, I was like, all right, if that's what you say I'm doing. But then people took it a step further and started saying I was practicing racism and sexism and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I don't know if y'all know. Number one, I left right after I spoke. And so I don't know what everybody was talking about. So if people were talking about those subjects, I wasn't there for that. But to say that about me, I'm like, are you serious?
Right.
Say you disagree with what I said, but calling me those names, that's a little ridiculous.
So I want to come back to that because I think that's a broader conversation what the public tend to do to our leaders when we disagree with some with black leaders. But everything you just said, what do you think? I mean, like how he explained it and, from the tactics and your point of view of language, like what's your take on it? And be honest, this is a family conversation. Let's have real talk.
So at the school board meeting, there were a series of different testimonies that happened. And that particular night, the majority of the speakers were focused on gender-based violence and its relationship to policing. And so when Kaleem did get up to speak, the person that he spoke, when he began to speak, the person that was speaking, one is almost 30 years old, right? So it didn't go well with her that somebody, when she was directly confronting Gloria in particular, who was...
Gloria Reyes,
a now school board president, who was interrupting her as she was explaining sexual assault advocacy work, because a lot of her work is doing sexual assault advocacy work. And so as she was explaining it, Gloria was trying to cut her off, and she was like, let me finish. I cannot, people won't understand where I'm going with this unless I can explain, because though people may intimately know sexual assault, most people don't understand actually how to end it. So she was explaining these series of things, and Gloria was interrupting her, and I think she said, damn. I think she was like, damn, let me finish. Then Kaleem went up there and said something similar to what he just had explained, but, abbreviated, and then left. So a couple of things were brought up. So one, she was like, I hear Kaleem, I hear what he's saying about, his perspectives of what, his cultural ideas. And she's like, and I'm a grown woman. Right? And he's not my father. And so this father tone, and that often happens to many women professionals, right, is that they speak in ways, they resist in ways, and then the thing said about them is controlling. It's you can't be like this. And she's like, I'm a grown woman, I'm a professional, I'm an expert, I've been doing this work, and if I choose to use that word, that's my choice. That a man, right, doesn't get to tell me I'm your daddy, or I could be a father to you. No, she's like, actually I'm 30 and I'm good. I know what I said, I know who I said it to, and I meant what I said. So I think to speak to that particular incident, that was the rub, right? And that particular night, mostly all of the testimonies, those before her and after her, were a lot of young girls. And also adult women, there was an indigenous mother there talking about colonization, boarding schools, and police traumatizing, and further creating trauma for herself when she goes into the schools, her young person. There was two white girls there, high school attendants, talking about the codes, the dress codes being sexist. There were other girls talking about inappropriate comments said to them about security guard. So people were really focused on what the experience were for young girls in schools. And so the comment did happen in that time, right? And that's not to say that what Kaleem directly said was hey, I'm against those things. But it did happen in that moment. And so that was a large part of the rub that people experienced or expressed. It's actually, we're here sharing our stories of trauma. And if we happen to swear, then we happen to swear because it was traumatic, or I'm frustrated, or I've been saying this. So that's one. And so my challenge to the leadership, and I did also mention this to Kaleem, though I said my comments were to the broader community, but I'll say specifically about the school board. I think it's bad leadership if they get to opt out of listening because they don't like the word damn. I think it's bad leadership that they get to opt out of listening because they don't like the word hell. Nobody's calling them out their name. Nobody's belittling them. Nobody's using slurs or anything against them. People are telling their stories of their trauma, their experiences. And I think if they say one or two of those words, how do you get to opt out of being tuned in? I don't think we get to do that. And I work with survivors every day. I work with people who come into my office in high crisis, like literally just got jumped on, immigration, ICE just snatched this person, worried they're about to lose their kids, and like high crisis. And people don't always come in gentle. And that's okay, because I understand what survivorship is, right? And so there is something to me about being a leader. And leadership saying we don't have to listen or we shut down because you use this word, when the violence isn't just that word. Like, the violence is so much bigger than that word. And that's what's disappointing to me. That's what's frustrating to me. And I'm like, look, if Jen doesn't like the word damn, okay, she gets to not like it, but she's okay. She's not the one experiencing the violence. She's going to go to Harvard and work a job. Like, she's okay. So she doesn't get to say, right? I think we get to demand that. She doesn't get to say, I'm not going to listen to these black girls who are talked about, who said, I was dragged out by my arms, who talk about the experience of being locked up in the juvenile detention where you're not allowed to have contact-to-contact visitation, so you're behind a glass. So I don't think she gets to turn her ears off. I don't think anybody gets to turn their ears off because they hear a word that they don't like. That's one. Mm-hmm. Two, I think whatever I think is perceived as mannerable or whatever is preferred, it's just that. It's what I prefer, right? It is not something I can force or impose, especially when, now mind you, this is happening simultaneously when there have been white supremacists who have attended those school board meetings who have said derogatory and inflammatory things toward black youth. And no one, not one school board, not one person stopped their ability to do that. Not one person said, hey, you just said some racist coded language. That's not welcomed here because that's violent, that's derogatory, that's inflammatory. That never happened. So this is happening in tandem. This is not a blank slate where everybody's nice and mannerable, right? This is in a context where people are experiencing violence, where one group is continually coming in there saying bogus inflammatory things, and then a black team may say, damn. Like, I don't understand how we make those equivalent, and I don't think that one happening outweighs the other. And I think that's what people are trying to get at when they talk about respectability. Like, what is a good victim, right? What is the right way to be oppressed? What is the right way to share your trauma over and over and over again?
Yeah. So this is why I'm glad we're having this conversation. Because I'm listening to you both. I think you both are addressing two different issues. I'm listening to you. I think I'm listening to you.
I agree.
And everything you said, I want to be like, amen. Like, everything you just said about victims and tactics and the word, damn and whatever. I hear you. I think I agree. I think I agree with everything you just said. I think y'all are saying two different things.
Me too.
And maybe I'm missing it. Mm-hmm. What I hear you saying is, because I watched your video that you did also, and you were saying you heard some kids saying the B word and all that stuff, right, in the background, and you wanted to address it from that perspective. But you're also saying there's a bigger issue how kids are acting in schools. And that was also what you saw on the school board was a symptom of what else is going on in schools and how do we teach our kids to have standards for our kids' expectations and what it means that black culture that's not part of our black identity to do those things. Mm-hmm. Right? That's what you're hearing, you're saying.
Let me tell you.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, and what I said, was that if we are going to have youth advocate for themselves, if we want them to be effective, and we need them to be effective, we need change, brother. We can't just have words. Then we've got to make sure that we don't say things that can be considered injurious or can be injurious. The word damn, there was other words said, and there have been other words said at school board meetings over the course of time. We would just watch them and see that. There are people who are abused. You don't know that on that stage. You know what I'm saying? Who've been through those things. So they got to sit and listen to that. So my thing that I've told my kids, right, and that even young people I've worked with is that, and I've been in situations like that where I've been challenged and traumatized, right? Just because you've been injured doesn't give you the right to injure someone else. you have to be careful about what you say, because what you say and do could hurt somebody else. So again, you said this young lady was offended because she was talking about it. When I heard those words, I heard the kids from Senate, and I thought, brilliant. I'm like, loving it. And when they started, I was like, all right. And then when I heard those words, I was like, oh man, I shut down. Dr. Kurth, who was next to me from Jefferson, I said, I got to go. I got up and I left, and it was all these adults were clapping. And at all these meetings, they're clapping. And you're right, some of these people have clapped for some of these other folks that are out of their mind, putting videos in kids' faces who I've also talked to. And so I'm like, this is lunacy. So I got up and I left. And then I came back. I said, I can't walk out. I got to say something, right? And so I waited till the young lady was done, and I was completely out of order when I grabbed that mic on the other end, but I waited till she was done, and I said what I said, and I wasn't speaking at her. I was speaking to the board, if you remember. And then she said something. I said, hold on. I think I remember exactly what I said. Everybody should go and watch it. But that was the context, is that our kids, you guys, we cannot allow this language to be reinforced as a language they can use every day against people. I say words outside of the context of my job and, in the community. I joke around with my kids and my family, but I don't use those words towards people, And I have people blow me up all the time, if you all have noticed. All the time. I can't keep a friend, you know what I'm saying, on some things, because I will say things that other people will not say. And I think it's critical. I said this also because I want people talking about this, but then I want them to go to the next level and do something about it. Our kids are dealing with a lot, and they're showing it every single day to us. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Are we going to argue? You're going to write more articles about me? Get the next op-ed ready. But how is that helping these kids? And that's what I'm pushing people to do, because it's easy to hide behind a pen. It's another thing to be out there and actually do this work with young people every day. Some of those people who are writing, they are. Be honest with you. And I know you guys do.
Yeah. No,
but we need the community to come together to do this work. And I cannot allow a young person to disrespect an adult in the process of that.
It does seem like in our schools, though, that...
Or vice versa. The adults shouldn't be disrespecting these kids. There's a lack of
expectation for our kids in our schools, for our black kids. I witnessed it. And part of my wondering is, because I think it's both. I think can be both truths in this. I think our teachers don't hear our kids well, and I think the school system doesn't hear our kids well. Our community doesn't hear our kids well. Our community doesn't hear our kids well, but I also think that translates to these teachers not having expectations for our kids. And if you let kids just do anything with any expectation, you're saying, I don't expect you to succeed anyway, so I'm just going to give you an IEP or whatever and push you aside. So the question is, how do we disrupt? Because I think you have to. I think if you don't disrupt to get people's attention, nothing will change. I think Freedom Inc. showed that. I think Young, Gifted, and Black stood up when they stopped the jails. I think you have civil rights just on that. If you don't disrupt, you don't get people's attention. That's just historical facts. The flip side, what do we do to instill to our kids, our black kids, that they are more than what their teacher might be telling them? They're more than a curse word. They're more than they are black, and they're beautiful, and they're talented, and they're educated, and you have a future, and there's standards, and there's accountability that comes with that. How do we do both?
I'm having a hard time understanding why we're equating some things.
Okay.
Why are we making a young person saying a swear word as big as police violence? Why are we making, people are saying no, shaking their head, but when I look at that situation, I hear the bottom line is, how can we get children should never disrespect adults? I'm like, let's think about that, right? So we're talking about young people who every day are suffering the poor decisions of that school board. It's true. Right? We're talking about this achievement gap or the literacy thing that you're talking every day. We have black children suffering poor decisions by leadership every day. And I actually think that's the big violence. I think the fact that children are not meeting literacy standards, I think lack of cultural education, lack of after-school activity, a lack of a bunch of stuff, culturally specific teachers, black teachers, all of those different. I think that is the big violence.
I agree with that.
The big violence. So when you say, Kaleem, we have to be careful not to say things that are injurious, I'm like, almost everything they say cause injury to our communities. And I'm not saying that loosely, right? I mean, like, this is a group of power who's making decisions about what's going to happen to our young people in schools. And so every meeting, they're saying something that maintains the racial disparities of education, the racial disparities of school. So what I think about, of all the, I don't know, let's say there were 1 million words said at that meeting, but of all of those words, the swear words are a few of them. So I don't understand why that isn't I don't understand why the school board language isn't the most disrespectful thing. I don't understand why when we hear that, we're like, absolutely no, Gloria, no more. No more can we maintain status quo. Because the price of that is Black children not being able to meet literacy standards. The price of that is the school to prison pipeline. The price of keeping them there is this. I mean, Freedom Inc. is going to publish a report very shortly. The data taken from MMSD and the police department around the very clear Black-white disparities with police and school. I mean, you cannot argue it. The data is so clear. So why don't we hear that as like, this is the language that's causing injury. Here's the decisions that are causing injury. And we are more upset about that. We got to say no more to that. We will never allow that. And that is the greatest injury. And that's where I think we depart, right? So I think a person can have, I think that's where we may depart. Because what makes me shut down isn't the Black Euro who said, I can't stand this. That's not it. What makes me be like, oh, this is too much, is to hear them say they're going to keep doing the same thing.
Right.
It's to hear them say, we hear you that Black children are suffering, but we're not going to make any big changes. That to me is the thing that messes me up. That to me is like the no more, how could you say that? Why are you saying that? You are causing violence. You're re-traumatizing. And that's what I don't get. Like, to me, that is the, I can't hear another word.
Right.
So I was a Black youth at 17 when I first started addressing this issue. Mm-hmm. And by 26, 27, I was on the Equity, Diversity, Advocacy panel with Dr. Ladson Billings and some others. And I was in tears, she could tell you, when we stopped short of what I felt we needed to do. And we all talked about needing to do because we wanted to do something we thought we could accomplish. And so we talked about ninth grade, math by algebra by ninth grade, reading by third grade, and attendance were our 3 issues. And I'm like, that's how we're going to address Black underachievement. I'm like, okay, absolutely not. And I broke down in tears, first time in a public forum ever. So in terms of being someone who has been working and fighting, pushing the state to create the UW Create the People program, Schools of Hope built around programs that I created, all these things, we haven't gotten to the point where we're changing the system of education. And so it is frustrating. I understand, because I've been dealing with this for 30 years. I've been living in the context of what you guys are seeing and feeling from this school board, right? So I get it. So that's why I'm saying I don't think we are far apart on that. My only issue is that when you use that language, not only do you turn off people who you think might be your oppressor, it's the people that are supporting you who start to shut down. When we lose that support, and we need that support to move forward, that's difficult. And I want to teach our young people a different way to advocate for what they believe in that gets results. And so I'm not disagreeing with what you said in terms of the context of what you said. It's the language. People have went berserk because of the language. And I said, all right, there's a whole nother thing going on here. I honestly never heard about respectability politics. I hadn't heard that before until it was used, and I think you all used it. And then the professors at the university just wrote their piece. And so I started reading up about it. I'm like, yo, there's a whole new language for this. So I said, that's the prism that they're seeing what I'm saying through. And so I said, all right, let me make a video. So I made another video last night to clarify what it was that I was saying to people, because it is challenging. Now, I also, because I stay in the schools all the time and I see how children are and I'm talking to them and there's all these fights going on and all kinds of stuff happening, I'm like, you know what? Community, we're not paying attention. And if this keeps you shutting your ears, I got to address that. And children, no, we can't do this. We got a brighter future than this. So Madison I've had to do my own school. People jack about this charter school. I'm like, I have to raise $1.7 million privately because the state only gives me $400,000 to do this work. And we're trying to redefine public education with what we're doing. And so I get what it takes to get to where we need to go, or what we have to go through, and the challenge and the frustration that it causes. My fundamental issue was the language. Now, the cops in schools thing was my issue with, we're spending so much time on that. Even though the school board, everybody would tell you, I was frustrated going through these school board meetings because I'm like, nobody's asking me about why black kids can't read. That they're not reading, that they're not succeeding, that we are creating the cradle to prison pipeline in our school system every single day. It was about everything else. And I was like, I was ready to be done. I was ready to honestly quit. I was like, if this is where we're going, you don't need me on your school board. Because that is the fundamental issue. So I tell you, people get mad at me still. I got stuff, people inboxing me. I support what you do. I support Freedom Inc. I support all these groups out here that are helping our young people find a voice. My only request was the language. And then the cops in schools thing, I was like, I really in principle don't support that. All these police officers I spoke to know that. But I want to know what they do because I'm going to be a school board member. I got to make intelligent decisions. And when I heard who these people are and I saw what they're about and I saw their background, I'm like, yo, if we're going to have police in schools, I want the ones that we got because they have an empathy towards our children. And I know that's not every case, and I know that might not be everybody who replaces them. But the thing is, okay, if we don't have them, then what next? And that's what I'm looking for. And so it's not ideal. I think it represents the relationship that we have a breakdown in relationships between adults and children. We have to have police do that work for us. I'm all about culture building in schools. You have a strong school culture, you don't need police. But how are we going to get there? So I'm not opposed to that. So that's where I was like, there's some conflating of things that people are doing and feeling and working on every day that's happening here. And when I started reading about people's definitions about respectability politics, I'm like, all right, I can see why they're seeing, because they're seeing it through that lens. But that's not where I'm at.
So I want to talk very briefly about respectability. So respectability politics, there's a long history of it. And the civil rights movement had done this too, and it's documented. It's not, what I'm saying you can find easily. So an example that people often use is the work of Rosa Parks. So Rosa Parks was incredibly brilliant. She was. What a lot of people don't know about her, she actually was organizing black women who were being sexually assaulted on buses. So by the time they did the bus boycott, she was well positioned to be able to do it because of her incredible years of organizing work. So that's one, is that Rosa Parks was an organizer. She's incredibly brilliant. But the piece where respectability comes in is Rosa Parks was not the only person to resist being moved on a bus.
She wasn't the first.
She wasn't the first.
Right.
And in fact, there was a woman before her, a young woman named Claudette. Claudette was very dark-skinned, maybe darker than me, very dark-skinned. And she was also a teen mother. And so the movement made a decision that she was not going to be seen as a good victim. Mm-hmm. And so they didn't choose her to use her story as a story to fight and organize behind the Montgomery bus boycott. So that's a very abbreviated example, but there are other instances.
Is that good or bad in your view?
I think it's bad, because I think it's bad when you say who's a good victim and who's a bad victim. What domestic violence work has taught me is that victims can fight back and victims look all different ways. And so if we get in a mindset that a victim must be someone who is in compliance with the violence that they receive, right? So they don't ruffle a feather when they're being mistreated, or their voice doesn't get loud when they're being told something that's harmful, we then miss a lot of our folks who are victims. And that's oftentimes why when there's a domestic violence phone call, why when the police show up, they also arrest the black woman because she doesn't look like a good victim to them. And so I do think we run into a lot of challenge. I think it's a huge problem, actually, when we set this idea around who is a good victim. I think the recent movement teaches us why, or demonstrates why. I think one of the things that makes movement for Black lives and this iteration of movement with like Black Lives Matter really special is because we don't say who's a good victim or a bad victim. You know how many people said Michael Brown and Ferguson? Well, he shouldn't have been. Like, no, we don't care. We don't care if his pants were sagging. We don't care if he told that officer, you better get away from me. We believe he still should have lived. We don't care if Sandra Bland talked back when that officer pulled her over. We think she should have lived, right? So we have the value in the assertion that black people have the right to live. I don't care if Tony Robinson was high. Y'all shouldn't have killed that boy, period. right? Like, there's no such thing as a good or a bad victim. And I think it hurts black people when we try to make that distinction. Because the truth is, most of us ain't going to be seen good because we're black,
What?
right? That's like
What?
But so on the point of so on the point of the respectability politics, there's actually a history of that, right? There's a history of people who've been like, hey, don't protest that way because that's, too mean or too bad. Mm-hmm. Hey, why are you all sagging your pants? You need to be with a business suit if you're going to talk to a mayor. Or why? So really trying to create this sort of avatar of what you're supposed to be in order to be seen as respectable when you confront the system. And so whole strategies have been built around that, right? Like in the civil rights movement, they used children in particular to confront racism because they thought that using children who were dressed beautifully in Sunday church attire would mean that they wouldn't receive violence, but they did. They got hoses put on them.
I don't know about that.
They did.
Well,
read it. You can read it.
I'm not disagreeing. That's for sure that they had people dressed in kids.
That was a strategy.
There was a strategy.
Yep.
People dressing nice and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it was just because they thought. I think they thought, well, we want people to see us as humans and being respectable and see us as right.
So that's where I was
think that's
getting.
different than what you just said.
No, I think they're continuations of the same thing. So one is like, we're going to look this way, right, to show that we're decent and human, with the idea that if people see that we're decent and human, they won't do that violence. That's where respectability politics demonstrates that it doesn't work, right? Because there's no such thing as a good victim or a bad victim. So you can try to, you know how many people try to assert their humanity and still have the most violence done unto them?
Yeah, but I agree with part of what you're saying. What I think I disagree with is I think Martin, they knew that there was going to be violence. They knew that people were going to put the dog. They were actually hoping that they were going to do it. So
in some instances, they were hoping.
So the news could see that, and they could also. So that was part of the strategy, recognizing that they can put a human face on the violence that was happening to people down south,
yes.
right? So I think it was more. I think they understood that violence was going to happen. But they also want to make sure when it happened that people could see that our black and our black women, our black children were seen as humans, right? So they want to dress their part so people could see them being as humans, not just as how they're trying to portray us as being animals. So I think it was more complicated than that.
It's both. There were definitely a strategy that did do that. And there were also particular actions where they used children to hopefully reduce the amount of violence that they experienced. Both happened. But let's just say both happened. Both are documented.
Right.
But let's just say they were doing it just to demonstrate their humanity. That says something to me, right? That the fact that you have to look in a way that white culture recognizes dignified in order to be seen as human. I actually think if your pants are sagging, or if you're in the suit, you have the same rights. You should have the same freedoms, and you should be no more likely to be hurt or injured by a police officer if pants are sagging or if you smell like weed or whatever. I think both people get to live, and that's what we're asserting. And so when it comes down to language around what's appropriate or not, I feel similarly, right? I feel like just because I may not use a word or so, I still assert that if a person uses words that are said to be cuss words, that they still have the same ability to advocate, that they should be seen as just as credible as an expert in that area and just as much as a victim of the thing that's causing violence. And that's where I'm challenging our leadership, is we don't get to turn our backs.
This is a fascinating conversation because you're attacking cultural norms, right? You're talking about cultural norms.
Yes.
But you're not digging deep enough to me when it comes to our identity of black kids. So what? Because I think when a lot of kids are cursing and they're angry, it's a lack of identity. Like they don't know who they are. So what do we do for our kids in our schools who are victims? I think everything you said about our kids reading at 11% rate, that's a state of emergency for the school district. I mean, but what are we going to do for our kids to help them say, you're more than that? What do we do for their identity in the schools? So I think everything, when I'm in the schools, you can see the lack these kids are trying to figure out who they are, and all the school districts telling them is, well, you can't read, you're trouble. You know what I mean? So how do we enforce them in them that say, hey, you know what, you're more than that? So how do you go back and do that?
Why, if I heard you correct, you're saying that when these young people are using this language, they are not acting within black culture. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying historically, yeah, part of it is. I'm saying historically, our black culture is we're not the culture that's like swearing. We don't swear at our folks. We're not swearing at our parents. That's not our culture. That's not the black identity, not the black American experience of going in and how we treat our elders, and that's just not our experience. And I'm saying, it's if you go down south, it's a totally different conversation, right? Here in the Midwest, it's different. And I think my perspective is, I think our kids have a lack of who they are, and they're trying to voice their way. They know how to voice the pain. They have no one else. They don't know. So they voice how they know how to voice it without them really having an identity of who they are. That's just my perspective.
I don't think. I think that, if you black young people are swearing, I don't think they're having a identity crisis. I don't think that is, to me, a marker of not knowing what blackness is to you or what blackness means to you. There's always been a swath of black culture, right? There's certainly what you're talking about is like a yes ma'am, no ma'am culture. But there's also been a culture of subversion, a culture of resistance. This ain't the first time the Panthers said the same thing in the 70s when they said to their elders, look, y'all can yes ma'am them, no ma'am them if you want, but these police officers are not members of our community. They're an occupying force and they do not deserve our respect. So there's always been a culture and a legacy of black subversion. So one culture is yes ma'am, no ma'am, and that's some people's culture. And I'm not here to argue or to diss that. But to say that we are acting that black youth are acting out of their culture all of a sudden by swearing, that's been that's been the case. So that's not just now.
No, I hope that's not what you got what I just said. I'm in the middle of articulating the correct way. I'm saying that in a whole, I think our black youth don't have the identity of what it means to be black and the culture of being the black identity. And I'm saying as a whole, the black culture historically is very respectful of our elders. And we watch our language around, at least now, when we're together, we swear and curse and stuff, but to our elders, we're extremely respectful of our families.
And it didn't have anything to do with white people.
Right, I'm just saying from our culture.
It was about...
Now, what you're saying, I agree. I mean, there was Martin, there was Malcolm, the Black Panthers, and, I'm not disagreeing that. I saw his laugh. I'm like, that's true. What you just said was absolutely true. Mm-hmm. But I'm saying there's also a part of our culture, I think the majority of our culture has been historically, you respect your elders and you carry yourself a certain way, etc. Black folks have always been in pain. Since we've been here, slave ships, we've been in pain, right? So that's always been part of our culture. And so, but I'm not trying to just talk about the swear, I'm talking about in general, right? A broader sense of our black youth here feeling like they have identity, that they're special. I think they feel like they're beaten down, they're victims, as you're saying. What do we do to instill in them that they're more than that? And to me, the cursing is just a small part of the symptom of all the other stuff, the mental drama, all that other stuff's going on with them. How do we instill that into our kids of what it means to be black and beautiful?
Yeah. So I think I'm all about black people loving themselves. I'm all about black people, being subversive, finding ways to create cultures that are outside of like this very violent thing that's happening to them. So I think this is a really important question. One of the ways that I think we need to do is to be able to show them options of who they can be and who they are. And that's not just, so part of that is like, I think people hear that as like, oh, I can be a mentor. Yeah, that's cool too. And there's other things too, right? I think it is affirming what they feel.
Right.
I think it is not shaming them to feel bad or to feel contained in the anger and the pain and the rage that they feel. I think it's giving people an outlet to express those emotions and feelings without trying to filter it. I think that pain, that feeling's got to go somewhere, right? I think it's teaching young people how to organize. I think it's educating them on what's happening. I think for me, I grew up in a hyper-policed community. Very police. I've experienced.
In Milwaukee. Right?
Yes, I've experienced police abuse. I've experienced it, right? So I know what that's like, right? And what was not helpful for me is for some black professional to walk in and be like, "Hey, I know how to get you." Like, actually, no, there's some other stuff happening here. One of the things that was most powerful for me was me to coming to understand how this world was actually working, so I could begin to not blame myself for the things that were happening to me.
That
and so I think So for us at Freedom Inc., a lot of the work that we do is political education. It is getting people to understand how what they're experiencing is actually tied, to these broader systems of violence and justice. And that helps people to unburdening themselves of the shame. You know how many people that we work with are ashamed that they can't meet their bills? Are down because they can't afford this and this? How many Black students are ashamed or feel down or feel like, well, I don't have the right things, I don't have clothes? Or how many survivors of violence blame themselves for their partners abusing them? So much of what we can do psychologically for our folks is help them understand where to actually put the blame, right? Which is why my approach to what we're discussing is like language with young people is not to come in and teach them, this is how you look more respectable to these adults who are harming you. My thing is to come in and say, tell me what's harming you. Let's figure out what to do with that harm and give them some tools to be able to create change around it, right? And I think we often lose members of our community when we start with what's wrong with them. When we start with, what do I need to fix about you so that this thing won't hurt you the same? Like, no, we're gonna stop this thing together, right? So that's what I think a lot of our work needs to be.
This is fantastic.
Can I answer the question, or is it?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was mortified when I first heard a student tell a teacher who simply asked him to clear the hallway, "You bitch, don't talk to me." And I was walking by, I said, "Excuse me? What did you say?" I stopped him in his tracks. He said, "You heard what I said." And I said, "Why would you say something like that to her?" He said, "She don't know me." I said, "Do you know her?" He said, "I don't need to know her." I said, "Whoa." She was like, "This happens all the time." I said, "I'm going to talk to him." So I talked to him. And then I think Sean from West was there too. Sean Gray came over. I was blown away. And so we talked about it. And eventually he agreed that he was wrong. But that you can't talk to people like that. This lady didn't do anything to you. He's like, that's how I was feeling, right? I walked out, I was talking to Justin Creech at West. And same thing, 4 girls. I walked out here, this F you and all this other stuff, and I'm thinking they're fighting or something. I said, yo, I got to go outside. Hold on. He's like, go ahead. So I walked out the room, and I was like, who are y'all talking to? I said, you guys can't say stuff like that up in here? Y'all fighting? And they looked over, and it was a white female teacher, and she just looked. I just asked them to clear the hallway. And my daughter, Alana, Black female, and her friends, Black girls, are saying, this is going on all the time, Dad. People don't know what's happening. I wouldn't want to be a teacher today. So we have our own children saying this. So what do we do? Do we say it's okay when you feel that way to say that? Or do we help our children figure out a different way to express that, right? So, number one, I feel like we need more adults in the schools. We need more people working with these kids. We need people to help. What would I do? Well, I'm telling you what I'm doing at my school. It's all about culture building. To give you an example, I had some teachers who, things were getting rough with our kids upstairs. I had a Black father call me, and he was like, Kaleem, I've been hanging out in there. He said, the energy they had in the beginning of the year, I'm just not feeling it. He said, I feel like they're breaking my spirit. I tell you his name, you know him. And I said, all right. I called my teachers at the table. And I said, tell me what's going on. And then I told them, look, we didn't create this school to create a cradle to prison pipeline for our kids. And that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing. Let me help you see that. I explained it to them. They were teared up. They were like, oh my God. I said, we got to see some change. And working with them, turn around 100%. Like, we empower Black kids here. We empower white kids. We empower Latino kids. We help them see who they are. We don't just celebrate Fried Chicken Day. We celebrate their culture, seriously. Mm-hmm. You come in my school, you'll see a little bit of everybody around the building. We bring people in to talk to them. Sheila Stubbs came in and read to them, like, we're not just going to celebrate Black heroes that are dead. We're going to celebrate Black heroes that are alive. Parents have issues. You got issues with your food? Tell my chef Barbara, we have we have a full-time chef. Mm-hmm. She'll put some food together for you, just quietly. You can take it home. Homeless, we got families into housing with all these different groups around town that we partner with. And so now my staff is like, we need a social worker, because poor Marilyn Ruffin, who's been our community initiatives and working with our parents, she's overextended. But We're sending kids to the Overture Center. We're having kids going ice skating. Like anything, this was our parents' thing. Anything they're going to do that you want to do, we're going to make available to you. And so that's what we're doing at our school, is this holistic framework of a school. And I believe every school should be doing that we should be empowering families, that in the Black culture in the South, those schools initially were an extension of your family. And that's how they operated. And so I'm like, you know what? We need to get back to that. We need to be an extension of the family and be that support base. When you're struggling with something or your kid's struggling with something, we're seeing a different behavior. Let's talk about this. What's going on? Can we help you? Can we get you some counseling? Can we do things like that's why I got to raise so much money, because the model's different. So I'm like, the way we can address this issue with our young people, there are strategies we can use so we don't have to continue to see that type of abuse happen. Where I get frustrated with the Madison School District is that was a part of the Madison Prep proposal. They shot it down. They couldn't see the value in having a community, family-driven model of education. They saw charter school. I'm like, you guys, our kids that are falling behind academically, a lot of the behavior problems, you look at them, 90% of them are kids that are academically deficient. And they're academically deficient because there are other stuff going on in their lives. They're suffering from different kinds of abuse. They're suffering from homelessness. They're dealing with these issues, but we're not dealing with those root causes. And we can do that in the context of school just by partnering with folks, right? Your group, other folks, to address those issues. And Madison, they're trying to do some stuff with these community schools, but I'm like, y'all, we got to go further than that. If I had kids falling behind, we had a prep year. Like kids who go to Harvard, they go to a public school. Some of their families got money, they'll send them to a private prep school for a year, because then Harvard and all these other schools recruit from them. Or basketball players will go to those schools to get into a top D1 school. Why can't we have a 5th year program within high school? Who says the kids have to finish in 4? If they're that far behind, so I'm going to float a prep year. You come in, you're behind. We're going to take that year, and you're just going to focus on your academic deficiencies. You can still do art. You can still do the other things, but when I'm not going to put you in an algebra class that is only going to reinforce for you an identity crisis because you're not ready to be there because we kept passing you through. And so there's ways that we can address this. That's the conversation that I keep wanting to have with people, and that's the one that I keep feeling that our school system keeps dodging, because they want to be the ones that have all the answers. That's my impression, right? But in the conscience, I also got to understand that there are teachers in these schools that do love our kids, that do want to see our kids succeed, that some of them may not know how to do it. Some of them may misstep, right? But we need all hands on deck. So how do we help them help us move forward? 'Cause the other thing, there's not enough Black kids being produced out of our high schools to produce enough Black graduates, to produce enough Black teachers yet. That's a traumatic experience that we're going through right now. So who's going to teach our children? It's not going to be us for a while. So it's like, how do we get people ready and prepared so that they can empower our young people? Because unfortunately, the sky ain't green, right? We have to be able to do that. And I think we can. So that's the part when I keep saying, man, we're spending all this time on cops in schools. I'm like, part of it too is school board, just vote on the dang proposal. What you gonna do? Vote on it. Quit pushing this thing off into the past. Now, James Howard did ask all of us who are running, do you guys want us to deal with this now, or do you want to deal with it later? So I think they were willing to vote on whatever that was. And I'm like, I don't mind if I'm on the board dealing with it. But I still think now it's time to deal with whatever that is, you're gonna have them or not, so we can get on to the other work that needs to get done too, and give that some focus. Not that we don't take the eye off the ball, but that we give that more focus.
So I would say I agree with a lot of what he shared, what Kaleem just said. I don't know why, I don't think we have to choose one issue or the other. One of the reasons why I identify as a Black feminist is
That's
have taught us that we don't live single issue lives. Mm-hmm. I think if you're Black, education is just as important as housing, just as important as policing issues, just as important as food, poverty, and a bunch of other things. So, and actually in our campaign, one of our demands, we have 3 of them. One of them is cops out of school. The other is around investment in youth of color. And we've actually been working really hard over the last year, working with communities to roll out a proposal when we say that, what are we talking about? And a lot of it is what you just shared. We do think we need cultural workers. We do think we need true restorative justice, because we're not saying harm doesn't happen, right? We're saying that we value our young people and we don't want them punished. We want them transformed, right? So we talk about cultural work, transformative justice, restorative justice. We talk about culturally specific curriculum. We want our young folks to know their history in ways that are honest and uplifting, right? We also talk about better ways to teach math and science, other ways to engage partners in the community. Like, there's a lot wrapped into that, right? So I want people to understand that we're fighting for all of it, right? We're never gonna allow them to tell us, do you care about sexual assault or education or police? Like, we actually care about all of it, because we know that our communities are suffering from all of those issues, right? So that's the first thing, is I don't think we get to let them tell us which one. No, we're gonna bring all of it, right? And I think Freedom Inc.'s work has been very comprehensive. We've created playgrounds, we've won gardens, we've addressed police violence, we stopped a jail, we work with people in ending sexual violence in their homes. I mean, right, because we say we're not issue-based, we're people-based, right? And all of our communities need these things.
That.
Yeah, so
I gotta use that myself.
Right on, use it. And all of our communities need these things. So I want to say I am in agreement with much of what Kaleem just shared. Like, I don't have yes, and we're fighting for investment too. And perhaps there are ways for us to work together to propose what that new investment actually is going to look like and should mean. But the other quick thing that we didn't yet talk about, but I want to talk
about a lot, though.
Yeah, the other thing we didn't, but I want to talk specifically about the ERO program and about what is a good ERO officer and what isn't. So, Kajwa Va, who is the other co-executive director of Freedom Inc., she's mom. Mm-hmm. So her oldest son, Makai, who's black, he graduated from Leopold in 2010. So she went to his graduation, fifth grade graduation, and she also went with his dad, who's black. So they get there, and they're like, hey, we're trying to get into the graduation. We talked to the principal ahead of the time. He's got our tickets. The people at the door didn't let them in. She's like, look, just talk to the principal. He literally can give us the clearance. They refused to do that. They called over an officer. The officer that they called over is Officer Johnson, who's one of the high school EROs. Officer Johnson comes over. They explain the situation to him, like, hey, my kid's about to graduate. We have clearance. We have tickets. The principal's instructions were, when we get here, just let them know, and they can verify it with us, and we'll let you in. For whatever reason, they were refusing to do this. Now, mind you, he is a cancer survivor, so at the time he was ill, and Kajwa had just given birth to her youngest son 2 months prior to that, so she's recovering from a cesarean section. He's refusing to let him in. He's like, look, I'm sick. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here. I want to see my son graduate. He hears his son's name being called. He just darts into the auditorium, watches his son cross the stage. They leave. They're in the parking lot, or getting ready to go in the parking lot. The officer comes up, takes out his taser. He's about to tase this man at this graduation. 5th grade graduation, hundreds of children around, family members and loved ones of these children. They go outside. He's like, man, like, what's up? Like, back up. Like, I just wanted to see my son graduate. He's damn near bent over himself because, again, he's a cancer survivor. Kajwa was like, stop. Like, why are you doing this? We saw him graduate. We're about to leave. They start going back and forth. Like, he's like, leave us alone. The officer's like, you shouldn't have did that. He like, I wanted to see my son. In the course of this, and Kajwa being like, leave him alone, don't arrest him, boom, she gets tackled. Officer Johnson tackles Kajwa. She blacks out for a second, comes back to, wakes up, she's handcuffed. They take her downtown, charge her with disorderly conduct. They tell her, look, you can just pay this fine and we'll, cut the ticket. And that's it. She's like, no, I'm going to fight it. So she fights it, and eventually it's dropped. Now, I use Kajwa's story because she's seen as someone who's a good victim, right? People would look at her and say she appears non-threatening. She wasn't using swear words. She wasn't loud. I'm serious, right? She's Asian, right? Like, all of these things, people would look at her and be like, that is unbelievable. But it happened. And it happened by a police officer that's in the school that people would say was a good one, right? So this whole, like, good cop, bad cop, doesn't matter, right? What's the bottom line of this is that he used violence and an incredible, excessive amount of force to stop someone from seeing their child graduate. right? And this is what we have in our schools. Regardless, right? And I applaud Kaleem for some of the things that he said, right? He saw a young person that he was like, this is not the behavior you should have, and he talked to him. Kaleem didn't throw him in a cage. He didn't slam him. He didn't tase him. He didn't paper spray him. He didn't beat him. So why do we have people in our schools who can do that to children? So I think we should have more cultural workers. If they're saying police or social workers, actually hire social workers, hire therapists, hire people who are trained in conflict resolution with adolescents or young people. So that's why we have such a strong emphasis on removing cops, because the data is so clear. It is racial. Like when we release this report very soon, it's going to be there's no way to argue anything else.
So I know a lot of people want to hear this conversation, and we have our Wisconsin Leadership Summit. We should actually have a panel just on this, because this is why we're doing this, right? So this is I know I'm always, I love everyone, unity. Y'all know me, right? I'm no unity, right? I'm about love. But however, this makes me want to cry, because this is one of the few times I'm listening to both of y'all, I'm like, our kids have a chance.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you having us on.
Because you two both are extremely passionate, and not just passionate, but you have strategies behind it, and you're doing the work, right? In Madison, we tend to have people who are philosophical, who don't do the work. You are both doing the work with a passion around it and a strategy around it, which I love. So my only advice and hope for you is, when y'all disagree with love. And y'all disagree, trying to figure out, not just disagree. Let's disagree how we can have a tactic to understand how we can accomplish that. Because Martin needed Malcolm needed Martin, they needed Thurgood. They all needed each other to get accomplished what they need accomplished. Madison needs the same things. And you guys are really, I hope you guys go back and listen to this interview. You guys are saying so much of the same stuff. You're just using different terms. But you're saying the same things. Work together when you can, and when you can't, be respectful of the other person's agenda, because if you don't, y'all are the front lines. And if y'all don't do it, it's not who's going to do it.
Can I say one last thing? Just to Facebook, that a lot of people get heated on Facebook, and I usually don't care about that so much, because people are passionate about what they care about, or they're closed up. They don't have any other forum in which to voice their opinion. They don't have the courage to do it. People say things about me on Facebook, and even around this, that I'm not really offended by. I'm amused by some of it, but if people could just not attack each other, that I can't deal with that. Literally going in on each other, going on the issue, debate and vehemently disagree. But don't beat people up. Don't beat up these organizations. Don't do that kind of thing. So,
it's part of being,
people insinuated that I was doing that. I apologize for that, but I don't tolerate that.
It's part of leadership. When you lead, you gotta take the blows. Not everyone can be a leader. Right? Just by the definition of leadership, you're gonna disrupt. Right. So, anyways, both of y'all, what you're doing is an amazing conversation. I wish we had more. Longer we go on this. I hope y'all come back to Summit. We can continue this conversation. But
be happy to.
I sincerely, y'all can see it in my eyes. I sincerely, I'm listening to both of y'all, and I sincerely, yes. I've been to basketball. I'm listening. Yes, we need to disrupt. I believe in Black culture. We need to keep our kids. I love how you brought that kid aside and said, "Yo, slow down. Let's talk." Because that was pain, right? That's pain that kid was dealing with, and he was trying to articulate in a way. You need to walk that kid through that pain, right? We need that. I love both of y'all. So what y'all do, we need y'all.
We love you too.
We need y'all. What y'all doing? So please keep up the
definitely.
work. Please,
thank you, Henry.
Our kids need it. So thank you. Another episode of Real Talk. We'll see you next time.